If I told you the things I've seen on my ways, if I told you the things I've done in my days, you wouldn't believe me anyway. So it's best I just don't say. I've lived 1,000 lives, I piloted 1,000 souls, I killed and fought and died just for a single role.
Hello, welcome.
Hey. Hello.
We are back for another episode of Small Game Hunter. Is it working?
Episode 7.
Oh.
Of course not.
Hang on.
Things are not working the way
Just in case you can't hear me. There's a big hand in front of the screen.
Please hold.
You should have a card with like technical difficulties.
I think that, like,
Yeah.
this is the please hold.
Yeah.
I like that one better.
We should take a picture of that, and that would be the sign.
That would
of
be
it.
Yeah,
the
that's
sign that you hold
like
up.
that's technical difficulties size.
It's
Just
always good to
Dave go. Me. Shit
I
happens.
think I like that for all kinds of things. Yeah.
How we doing?
This is a problem I don't know. What's
Oh.
up? Oh no, I think it should be okay.
Oh, maybe it's
Good?
okay.
We good.
Should we test anything? Do you want us to talk?
Yeah, well, it seems like it's bouncing. It just I had to scroll down. I was a liar.
Oh.
There weren't technical difficulties.
Oh, okay.
We're great.
We're making up drama, Dave.
Triple checking that everything is perfect.
Who the hell would have known the drama kids would be so dramatic?
Yeah.
Well, if someday there's an edited form of this, hello,
Hello.
and welcome.
We are professionals,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong.
Welcome to Small Game Hunters, episode 7. We will be talking about a game called Fall of Magic.
Woot.
Yes, and if you're viewing, part of the viewing audience at home, you're watching this on YouTube later or whatever, you can see the beautiful box that's here in front of us. It's a nice long, almost like, think of a slightly thinner and longer shoebox. Someone who's got
If you were going to buy a wand in a box,
Yes.
it would come in a box this size.
Yes, very
Or if
appropriate.
you already have bought a wand, it's a slightly bigger box than the ones that we have.
My wand is a lightsaber because all that wand shit is just shitty Star Wars to me because I'm old.
Whoa, fighting words.
Well, lightsaber's just laser wand, right?
It's just a laser wand, exactly.
So part of what is included in the box, maybe we will, if we opened it up for you, then what you would find is this nice long scroll, right? So this is a game, and if you've heard of this before, it's the one that you play on a scroll. And I've said it before, this is one of the traps that I lay out there for
Absolutely.
games on
Very
demand at the con.
visually impactful, yes.
Yes, visually beautiful. The art is really pretty. The kind of the text on it is all scripted, and it looks all old school.
It looks like it's basically a cloth. It looks almost like linen-y scroll with these beautiful wooden dowels at each end. It's in red, black, and beige, I suppose, and it's really beautifully drawn and put together.
It's actually the reason I started gaming 3 years ago in RPGs.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it trapped us. The whole group of us.
Yeah,
It worked. So
It took
yeah,
3 years for me to
The
play
nefarious
it.
domain.
I will
You
just
really
set this
did.
out here as flies are attracted to
yeah,
her.
Right,
Unique and
absolutely.
Crew. That was your first time at Strategicon, I
Yes,
think,
that
right?
was my first time.
And you guys were just walking by, and I had
We
this
were
out
on our
there.
way to
and-
open gaming. We were looking
Yeah.
for some board games, and then we saw a pretty map.
Gotcha.
That was it.
Well, there's an intersection here between board games and role-playing games in this game because you can actually see the scroll in and of itself being sort of like a game board where you put tokens and sort of track where you are. So there's a big board game type of element to the game.
And there's rules about where you can move your token and when and all that.
So I guess before we get into like the game, and you can hear us gush about how pretty it is, you know, a little bit about it, right? So this is Fall of Magic. It was written by Ross Kalman. Ross also runs Heart of the Deernicorn, which is a company that produces a couple of RPGs and stuff, a lot of stuff that he's produced. And they are up in Olympia, Washington. And not only because he kind of produces all this stuff here, this is not like I'm going to kickstart this and have someone in China produce it kind of thing. This is made in the USA with USA labor and USA prices. You will be paying for that, but you are supporting locals here. And he actually has his own printing, kind of like studio and business there. So he does T-shirts and stuff, and you'll start to see, if you're familiar with like Scum and Villainy and some of these other games out there and game companies like Evil Hat and Bully Pulpit and some of these game companies, they're producing shirts through Ross. So he's actually like producing these little custom, limited press shirts for like Starcrossed and other games like that.
So that's where you get your shirts.
That's where I get some of my shirts. So anyways, that's kind of the starting point here. It was a Kickstarter that was out many years ago. Now you can actually buy it new from the website, and I know every once in a while they kind of are like have to reprint it or whatever, obviously. But it is also available in an electronic form. So for those of you who cannot afford right now, I think it's $105 to buy this game.
Scroll,
this piece of
two-sided
art.
coins. And there's other stuff like these cool little metallic coins that are basically the game pieces that represent the characters on the board.
Yeah.
The instruction manual and a D6 for
Some high-quality cards.
some high-quality cards for when you start crossing the oceans and hitting some islands.
But 105 is it's a tall ask, right?
It's pretty hefty.
Right.
I mean,
you want to support this piece of art. Is what you're doing.
yeah. I mean, we're talking price equal to like entry to like D&D when you have to buy a player's handbook, the DMG, and the monster manual.
Right.
At about $35 to $40 a piece. It's a comparable thing.
Yeah. But it is available in electronic form. So, and for those of you who play online and use Roll20, for example, the digital version of this game, which is $15, totally affordable. I mean, not only can you decide if you want to print it out on some paper and play it on a table, you could put it on your iPad and kind of play it that way, but you can also load it into Roll20. Roll20 has copies of even the tokens and things on there.
Oh, nice.
So, I mean, a lot of people do play online, and if you go out there and look for actual plays and APs on this game, you'll see people who have played this in Roll20, and it's really pretty. I mean, it's just as pretty as kind of looking at the scroll, or as close as you can get in the virtual land.
Nothing's as pretty as looking at that scroll.
Right? What are some stats of this game? I mean, it does say, like, just as far as the number of players and all that kind of stuff, it's 2 to 4 players is kind of what it advertises. However, I've played with more than that.
Yeah, we played with 6, I believe,
Yeah.
when we played at our table. It wasn't a problem at all.
Yeah. And we'll talk a little bit about, like, what, maybe what that sweet spot is and whatever, and how we felt about those games. I've got opinions. But it says 2 to 4. It can easily handle a little bit more. It says playing in 2 or more hours. I think that's lowballing.
Yeah, I think this is at minimum a 4-hour game, personally.
See,
we took.
I feel like it can go faster if you end up with a group that's not going to keep throwing in extra. Like, yeah, it'll be a 4-hour game if we sit down with the usual story gamey crew. But if you're sitting down with people that aren't used to that as much, or maybe they're not as, I don't want to say not as creative, but not as outgoing about it.
Yeah.
You could end up with a pretty short game,
Well,
I think.
that can be said in general for a lot of story games. It's
Yeah.
all about investment and how much you want to explore. I mean, any one of these games, even the ones that are, when you look at something like Skeletons or 10 Candles, on the surface you're going, yeah, we can blow through this and not a problem. But I've never had a game of 10 Candles not go at least 4 to 5 hours just
Right.
because we're so in love with what's going on that everybody just keeps adding detail.
We like to spin our bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. And not only
That's
that,
the way to play.
but commingle our bullshit. You know, that's
Right.
one
Oh,
of the
that's a
great-
great
Single
idea.
hour
How about
bullshit.
this?
Yeah, exactly.
So I have heard once of some table at a con blowing through this in like an hour. But like it did not sound like they were playing it kind of, I think, as intended to kind of like share in the story and kind of make a sweeping narrative. It was very much like like just quick little things, and I don't think they really enjoyed it from the opinion I heard of the person who told me that story.
I can understand that.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if you're not telling that cool story,
You're not invested.
Yeah.
if you're just throwing out like a one sentence answer to everything,
But the thing is, there's no other element to this game.
Right.
Right.
If you're not, I mean,
It's
if
weaving
you're
the
looking to
story.
go in there and fight some monsters in a dungeon, yeah, there's caves in a dungeon in here, but that's not really the point of the game. I mean, the game gives you cues to storytelling, but it doesn't actually give you an adventure throughput. You know?
I will warn that I have seen this game very easily be 3 or 4 sessions that are each 3 hours long. So if you
man.
look at some of the actual plays for, some of the folks who played this on the Gauntlet like a year, 2 years ago, like they are long, slow, sweeping narratives. And very often when I play this, we'll see, like I did an analysis where I went through, there's locations as we'll see, and I went and tried all the different forks to see how many locations there would be no matter which way you went. And there was always about 12 or 13. Like if you went to like you didn't skip places. And I generally find like 4 spots will take me about like a 3 or 4 hour game. So I kind of see like, 12 hours, you could totally spend that playing this game. And maybe at the end, like when we get to the later part of this little talky bit, we can talk about like strategies to try to make it fit in a one shot, because whether or not you guys had the same experience, because all of us here played at the con and we played little one shots of this game on different tables in some cases, and it'd be interesting to hear everyone's different.
I don't know how it was on your table because I was at a separate table when we played, but we did a lot of little fast-forward-y bits during the thing where we're like, you know what, I think we've done everything we want to do out here. Do we want to move locations? And it was a very open conversation. But did you guys actually skip over anything, or did
We
you?
did. We skipped over one location, I think.
I don't remember which one off the top of my head.
Yeah.
It's probably, I don't remember which one either, actually. Was it the Hall of Woods, maybe? We skipped over one towards the beginning.
Right.
One of these two we skipped because we were like, we've already
It
had
felt-
a woodsy adventure.
Yeah, it felt like we were already in a woodsy
Yeah, because it's
area.
like the.
But that's it? That's the only thing?
That's the only thing we skipped.
But for the most part, players only did one prompt. And what I noticed about your table, actually, when playing, is that you guys had character interaction in most locations. Ours didn't, for the
No,
most part.
we were all
It was
kind of on our own.
independent kind of storytelling that was happening in this bigger story. And I
Interesting.
thought that was really different. It was so interesting to see the difference.
Yeah, and I really didn't pay too much attention about what was going on the other tables, but it just sort of like we fell into a consensus that we wanted to play as a party. And it never really even crossed my mind, being so D&D trained, to not form a party and start doing things individually. But those interactions were really sort of like the funnest part to me of the game, because everybody came up with like one of them was like, I am the only living male midwife in the land. And he was like an apprentice mage, a dropout from the mage school that didn't make it, so he decided to go into midwifing. That was
Obviously what you do.
that's the thing that you do. Yeah.
I mean, how many D&D games that happened? I'm sure tons.
Just last week.
But actually, let's talk a little bit about how you start up the game and how you
Yeah.
come up with these characters, right?
I call one unique.
Yeah. Since you're like right in front of the scroll and can read it without
I
having to read
can
upside down.
read it. I think what was really cool about this game is because I'd never played it before, and this was a GM-less game, it really felt GM-less. We read through the instructions together, and that was all we really needed to know, and it felt super simple from the beginning.
And no one at her table had ever played before.
Not a single person. So it really was a test of how GM-less this game could be.
It was the same as we were all fresh at the table, and we opened the pamphlet that is the instruction manual.
Yeah.
And it's like 8 pages, 10 pages.
Yeah.
Like 10 pages, and that's it.
And we
it's
didn't even
literally
have to
a
read
pamphlet.
all of it
Yeah.
because the last couple pages are how to wrap up the game.
I'm glad to hear that my facilitating like this wide con version was successful because I was freaking out. I was like, I didn't know how I was going to do this.
Oh, you facilitated
Yeah,
flawlessly.
it was just like, okay, but no, go on.
It worked out. So we read through the instructions, but essentially you read the one-sentence intro, which magic is dying and the magus is dying with it. We travel together to the realm of Umbra,
Yeah.
where magic was born. And then we pick a name and kind of pick a title through that, and it's all there for you on the map. Which
Number
is
one
cool.
conflict we had on our table was how to pronounce magus.
Yes.
Yeah, everyone
and
was pronouncing
we
it
were all
different.
changing it. Like
For
every time you
3
said the
hours,
word.
we pronounced it
This is
differently.
It's nice to know
And
like
I
all
want
the
to say
tables have the same
4
issue.
people
Yeah.
pronounced it different ways each
Yeah.
time, too.
Yeah.
No, there were 4 different pronunciations. Bouncing around.
How do you pronounce it?
Magus, magus.
I say magus.
See, I think because I think mages. But
I say
now-
magus. Usually is when I read that word is
But
magus.
it's magic, so mages.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It goes into the GIF argument, which we won't fall into.
Right. It's the same.
GIF.
I tend to say mages because of
Yeah.
like Star Trek, Deep Space Nine with the Grand Nagus,
Oh,
Well,
right?
that
It's all
settles
how
it.
you come at nerd. Like,
Well, I think it's actually a language thing because mago is
This is true.
in Spanish. And,
Right.
Magus.
Which
just
it probably has some type of Latin derivative. So
one
that
would
might be-
think.
yeah.
Yes.
Right.
So,
Magus.
but like you said, you have the introductory thing, so you know what's going on in this world, and Fall of Magic. Also, the title sort of like tells you what's going
Can you
on.
find on your table, so, and like you said, like some examples of characters can be like Kabu, the apprentice of Ravenhall, or Fawn, the swineherd of Barleytown, or whatever. Did you find that people ever chose things that weren't there? Like names or titles or stuff like that?
I think for the most part, everybody picked a title that was from the board. Maybe a name that was different. I stuck to the map.
I think we all stuck
I
to
think
the.
we all stuck to the
Everybody
map.
stuck to it. There were a bunch of neat options. I mean, was it Piccolo was the name of the midwife guy, and it's just such a great name, right?
I think your first time going at it, why not? There's
Yeah.
some cool options. If you
Yeah.
play this over and over again, then I don't see the problem with
And I will
either.
say that, like, having played it, so that wasn't my first time playing it. Like,
Yeah.
I've probably played it like a dozen times in little pieces and sessions and stuff. But there's been a bunch of times where people will just kind of like choose weird names, either change their name or change kind of their title. So, like, instead of maybe the Fox of Mistwood, they decided to be the Swan of Mistwood, and they have an idea for what that is or whatever.
The
Yeah.
crab singer was the bomb. I just
I like that in the instructions it specifically talks about Crab Singer and how it's just like you can make it whatever you want it to be. But I think it's cool too that it gives you a location that it's from that corresponds to somewhere on the map. Because when you get to that location, you kind of have some type of tie-in and buy-in already.
the options you're given is you choose a name, and there's a list of names, and then there are basically 2 sort of like descriptors and a place where the character is from. So you get to pick a name, you get to pick something that's sort of like an honorific, like a apprentice or a golem or whatever, and then of a place. So you belong to a place somewhere on the map.
Yeah,
So
and like-
instantly you're in there.
Yeah, you're in there, and what's interesting is I've seen that go both ways as far as, like, do you want to visit that place? So, like, there are forks in the road, so even though all these places are on the map, you don't necessarily visit all these places. It's up to you and the party, kind of like where you decide to visit. There is a road. It is a bit of a railroad, but there's those forks in the road where you can decide: are we going to go up to the mountains, or are we going to go down this way, or whatever?
Yeah, like we specifically decided not to go to Stormguard.
And we had 2 characters that were
From
from
Stormguard,
Stormguard.
yeah.
So half our party was from there, and they're like, nope, we do not want to go home.
That's what I was going to ask. How many character decisions were actually made just straight up off of the little cues that you get on here?
A lot. What for me when we started, I did not realize these were all locations on the map.
No,
Right?
because when
Yes.
you're instructed to start
Yeah,
with
it's
it
like you
covered,
don't know the
Yeah.
map
so
at
you
all.
really only are seeing this when you're deciding. I didn't know that
And
was a
that
place
is a
on the map.
really good point. And, like, the instructions specifically have that, like, as a rule, where you don't peek ahead.
Right.
And even as you start to unroll it and travel, you kind of start rolling it up on the back end.
Mm-hmm.
So you're kind of always focused on where you currently are, right?
Right.
But yeah, no, I've noticed that as well.
So
yeah.
I like the little fog of war of it too, because you don't know what's coming up and you can't plan
for
ahead.
sure, for sure. What was interesting was like, so I started making some character decisions because I made the crab singer of Estalia, right?
Naturally.
And I made him like Russian fisherman guy. That's kind of the way I went. And then we get there and it's like the Golden City. And I was like, oh, I was mistaken.
He was humble. That's
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, no, our crab singer, too, was just on a quest to be able to sing to more than just crabs. That's all he wanted to do, was to broaden his crab horizons, his crustacean horizons.
beautiful.
Cool. So character generation, super easy. That's it.
Super easy.
Yeah.
Took us
No-
like 10 minutes.
no-
People just pick that, let's go. It's great.
No, and there's coins that you can go with it.
Yes.
That go
Yeah,
with
you
the
choose as your
character
icon.
creation, so
You put that on the actual
essentially,
map.
who
And if you
wanna
look
be.
at these coins, like they have two sides. So like, here one side is like a raven or bird and the other side is an egg in a nest, right? Or like you have one which is a whole sword, right, shining in the sun, and the other side is like that broken sword, right? So they have these kind of two images. I will say that the game comes with 5 of these coins. One of them, this little fox one, wasn't there in the original game. It was kind of sold as like an extra Kickstarter-y thing where they added a couple extra elements. I don't know nowadays if you buy the box if it comes with the extra coin or not, or if it's like, a one-off. But they're all pretty cute, and you do pick one for each character.
It represents
And I
it.
think you
Yeah.
pick one to represent the mages. as
The
well.
magus, yes.
Yeah.
Because
I'm going to stick with mages.
magus, magus,
It's
whatever.
okay, it'll be
There
just
doesn't
like
need
the
to be a
game.
consensus.
We will-
English is a language constantly in flux.
Yes. Like, constantly in the same half hour.
Right. I'll say it differently every time I say it.
That's right.
He
Magus.
wants to say it. Consistently inconsistent.
But yeah, the game starts. We have these things, and the terms that they use here in the book is there's locations, and within those locations, I think what are the words that they use here? Scenes and story prompts, right? So, and you'll see if you're looking at the actual map, the scenes are in these kind of like all caps red letters, and then the little story prompts underneath are little phrases and things, which help inspire you in some way.
Yeah, so you're basically highlighted locations within that general area, and then there are cues that you get. Also, an interesting thing is that there's ways for you to pick up sort of aspects for your character. I don't know what they call them in the game.
They're called traits.
Traits.
Yeah. So, for example, Ravenhall is the first spot, right? And we have a couple of cool evocative things, right? Like the bridge and the menagerie and whatever. And one of the spots is the rose gardens, right? And underneath it, instead of a story prompt, it's got these little plus signs and then these words, right? Beautiful, legendary, fierce. And when you go there and set a scene, instead of just playing out a scene and we're done, you're actually assigning these traits to somebody, right? And that could be to yourself. You can totally selfishly go like, yes, I'm the legendary whatever. But it could be you're spying somebody else. Maybe you're playing the scene with somebody else. Or maybe you just heard they're coming here, like one of the PCs or something. And you give them one of these tags, which have pretty much no mechanical value in the game.
Whatsoever. It's just a thing
Just
that
more
informs
story,
you about
right.
your character. Did you guys have a lot of NPCs that you brought up? What was your
Very
interactive?
few.
Not that
We had
many.
a couple.
They came out later on in the game, I want to say.
Again, it was our experience was very different from
Yeah.
yours.
Yeah.
Like the whole way through, it was like, yes, we were all sort of traveling together, and we had a couple of moments of like where our stories intersected and like almost like bumped into each other, like a handoff. Like, okay, but then it was all these little like, this is your experience in this area. Tell about it. And so like that was the story that we told. Almost like when you're reading a book and it changes main character per
Yes.
per chapter.
Oh, yeah.
That
So
was
that's
definitely
kind of the
fun.
way ours was. So like, yeah, some events.
We acknowledged
lined
each
up,
other's
and we would-
existence, but we did not interact very
Yeah,
much with
yeah.
each other.
I don't know where it came up during this whole thing, but one character decided that they were traveling with a baby. And then another character decided that baby was the grandchild of the Magus. and that we were and basically the daughter of the Magus was actually having this child in a stormy night in a carriage while traveling back to Raven, and that baby actually became a central figure within the entire thing because we were trying to get that baby to the source because it was basically starving and vagic. It was not doing well, and the mother died in childbirth. So our entire party focus was get this baby better to make sure that it becomes the next Magus so magic doesn't die. Because one of the things that we agreed upon is that it was sort of magically technical. If you had a magical fridge, you had a magical TV. There were all these conveniences within culture that depended on magic, and all those things were sort of dying down. So imagine it's kind of like that one TV show where electricity went away.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so everybody was like, what do I do now? My turkey slices didn't work. I'm going to have to use a regular knife. So that added a little bit of urgency to the quest. We kept looking for elements that give us more motivation to finish a story.
That's interesting. That kind of plays into like the ending I had, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, like I think one of the really cool things about like within my game personally, when we played at the con, was it was very that first scene. The first couple scenes, we did have a couple of like people interacting with each other in the scene, so it very much set that tone. And I'm always curious with these story games, like a lot of times when they have such simple rule sets, like how much of it is going to be obviously like what we bring as players into the game. And I think this one has a lot of room for that, right? Like if you guys started playing in a way and you're like falling into that groove and it's like, this is working for us, then that could be like the tone through the whole thing, right? Whereas ours, like, it really kind of started to slow down because we were doing like a lot of like characters start talking to each other at the camp. Yeah, maybe I'm setting this scene up and I'm talking a little bit about like this custom I'm doing or whatever, but someone else would kind of like walk up to me and talk to me about it or like kind of interact with me. So, the way we were playing might be like very different, in some ways. But yeah, I think this game is very susceptible to that, right?
I think we're really interested in exploring the map, and so every time we got somewhere, everyone wanted to go to a different scene.
Oh, that's cool.
Immediately because we wanted to experience something different, answer a different question, and we really wanted to get through to the end of the map, and because we just had a feeling that it would take a long time. I think that's what ended up happening and why we ended up having such independent stories. Right. Is that we wanted to see as much of the map as possible.
See, that wasn't really a concern for my table. We didn't give a crap if we got to the end of the thing. Yeah. We just wanted to tell the tale.
Have fun on the way. Yeah.
And the thing about it is that towards the end we were running out of time, and we said, screw the rules. This is what's going on. You give me what's going on with this guy. What's going on with that? And we just sort of finished the story sort of as a round robin.
Like an
epilogue-y sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I think one of the things that you can definitely do here, and it's, again, because the rules are so light, you can kind of like play with it. And what I've seen done sometimes, or what we've done, like you guys were talking about skipping that next kind of foresty location because you felt like you kind of already did that. You wanted to see other parts of the map. Right. I'm definitely interested in playing this game where I kind of start halfway through because I've played so many times. Like the first half of the map, to me, I get it. I've seen it so many times. I'm done with it, and I haven't gotten to really explore like the islands and the other stuff that comes later, or the underworld.
I loved the islands.
Yeah,
I don't know if we get there.
When we get there,
we will talk about that for sure.
It's like playing on the computer, playing Civilization, right?
Yeah,
you start games. And you start in this ancient era, and your people are just learning how to farm and build the pyramid. Like that. All that stuff happens, and you've played that part of the game 4,000 times, and you're like, I know there's like aircraft carriers and jets at the end of this game. I'd like to see that, but I never get there because I always forget.
I think the next time I'm going to play this, we're starting in the middle of the map. And then maybe we'll just flash back every once in a while. And then that way, we already kind of like know each other. We're kind of doing things. And then we'll kind of like, if we need to, we can jump back and like play a scene over here.
Which I think could easily work because most of the characters that are from somewhere, those locations are towards the front of the map.
Yeah.
So I think the flashbacks would make sense.
I very much got the sense that this is the known world, and then the other elements towards the end of the map and the islands, those are more of, there be monsters.
Yeah, actually, every single one of those characters comes before the ocean, right? Estalia is like the last place one, before going on the water. I think what would be interesting if you do these kind of hacks too, this game is under the assumption that we all start here at Ravenhall with the mages. But if you've read any of these fantasy books or watched the movies or the thing
pick
about
up people along the way.
pick up people along the way, and if you've created people in these locations and start like in the middle somewhere, you can kind of see how we picked people up on the way and play that game instead,
That
right?
could be fun.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but there's room to like play with this game in different ways. Shall we?
So, did you guys actually hit all of the individual story elements per location, or did you guys gloss over them, or you tried?
To, actually.
We started because we started the game with 4 players, but then one had to go.
Yes.
Partway
I think
through.
that's another reason our game went by faster towards the end.
Right.
We had 3 players.
But we generally didn't do, like, a couple of times somebody did more than one. But most of the time it was like after we each told a piece of the story, then it was like, oh, time to move on.
and
right.
the mages has moved on.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe we should take a second to talk about that because we.
Oh yeah, the biggest moving.
We're kind of like showing some of the rules as we go. Like, yeah, we're taking turns setting a scene in a location, but then once everyone's done a scene and optionally done a second if they want, then there's the magus that moves us all together, right?
Which we all play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and what did so? Like Unique said, we all take turns playing that, right? So if it turns out it's my turn and now we're moving to a new location, I get to play the magus as we're moving from one place to another. What did you guys think of that? Like, how did that go for you guys?
Well, I liked it. I mean, I liked the fact that we all got to tell some of the story from a different perspective.
Yeah.
Because that's always fun. Like, it's always like, oh, cool, I'm stepping out of the character that I've sort of inhabited for myself.
Yeah.
To tell something else. We kind of played the magus as, like, sort of distant.
Very distant from the party.
Like,
so
she was just sort of walking, and the rest of us were like, we gotta make sure she gets there okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like, we're like, okay, well, she's going, everybody pack up, let's go. So she wasn't really a character that, like,
she wasn't fully fleshed.
interacted
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah.
She was just very mysterious and...
The same thing happened at our table. There was a very similar sort of like this. Whoever's playing the magus is more of like an element that moved the story forward. It wasn't exactly I'm telling a story about the magus. I'm just stating some things that are. I'm establishing some truths, and I'm moving the narrative on when I play the magus. But what ended up being funny is that one person decided to role play the magus as sort of like this doddering old fool that goes, "Oh yeah, I got magic. Let's do a thing." And that sort of spread around, and everybody started playing in the same way. So it was just like a schizophrenic old man running around with a bunch of dudes. It was crazy, but fun.
I think in the first time, one of the first times I played this, like I was the one who was going to play the magus the first time around, and we hadn't seen the magus yet. We had all kind of like explored, this first location. And I was like, I didn't really know what to do and what kind of character to create. So what I did is I made this kind of magic force that was going to be passed like a baton from thing to thing across the countryside. So like it started with like this small group of like weird fairy creatures that were all walking together, and that was the magus. But then as we got to the Oak Hills, the second location, like we met an old woman on the road, and they passed like the magus to her, and then she became the magus.
Oh,
so,
neat.
and what it allowed us to do that specific game, was as people took over the magus, they would kind of like be able to change the character to be whoever it was for that part of the journey. But one of the things that I'm always worried about as a facilitator coming into this game is, do I set the magus and then like, let's say I make it like an old doddering, like silly fool of an old man or something, then we're kind of stuck with that. And like, did people have thoughts about who the magus was? One of the things that I use as a strategy sometimes in the beginning, and again, this is my little skin on the game, is, I like to have everyone who does a scene in the beginning tell us a little bit about who the magus is. Like,
That'd
and
be
that
helpful.
could be a rumor.
Yeah.
It could be maybe they're the apprentice, so they'll tell you something about the magus as they've studied under them for, who knows how many decades, right? Or maybe I'm from some other place and like I just heard that the magus does this or looks like that or whatever. And we get all those rumors, and then that way we've kind of like made this little mush pot of a character, and then we kind of see what it looks like as we explore it. But it's, you know, it doesn't have to be like the old Gandalf dude, right?
Right.
It could be anything. And I have seen lots of weird maguses,
And-
you know.
I think even accidentally, we kind of did that.
Mm-hmm.
Like with our first little bits of story, we all sort of told the reason why we'd come to the town and
Right.
why we were sent here to help, or what our interaction was with the magus at that point, and like, so that kind of set her. And in our case, it was her
Right.
up as like, okay, well, like here's what we know about her, and then whenever somebody played her as a character, it just kind of built a little onto that.
Right.
2 of the 4 prompts at the beginning really make you talk about either the magus or magic, and I think it pushes you in that direction.
Yeah.
And you can't help it when you're starting to explain your storyline, and your character, why you're here and what you're doing. It has to really connect to the magus, so that's helpful. But it would have helped, I think, to be able to flesh her out in our case, but whoever the magus is, or whatever the magus is.
Yeah.
Because there is pressure to be the magus the first time you get to the next location.
Right?
Yeah.
That, I
You feel like
that.
you're setting a big part of the tone.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so it's something to be aware of, I think, right? There's different strategies, and you can also just be like, who cares, and just figure it out. as
Well,
you go.
and we did this unintentionally, but I think everybody that took over the Magus when we moved to a new location basically sort of took it as, this is an old guy that's been all around the world. He knows everybody here. So what we did is, like, the Magus would show up, talk to the main principal NPCs, like the king or lord or whatever is going on, introduce it to the rest of the party. And while we're doing that, we sort of established some characterizations about the Magus as he interacted with the people that we made up. And somebody randomly at the table would play, like, you know, the king of Estalia or whatever.
Right.
And who I played, like the monarch from Venture Brothers. How dare you come? But that's sort of like, we used him as sort of like intro to the new scene instead of establishing a lot of stuff. We just sort of made it an easy way for the party to be able to install themselves in the new location.
Right.
The prompts kind of lend themselves to that too.
Yeah.
Underneath each location, you're really mostly describing what's going on at that location.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed, but I think we played in first person with our characters and in third person with the mages a lot.
We did.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. No, that's cool.
That's a good point.
You'll also notice as we go from like the first location, Ravenhall, doesn't have its own little prompt, but the later ones do, right? So like the second one will say the ending of summer, or a lot of them say the hospitality of whoever the principal person is there, like the Barley Lord, or, you know, the Storm Queen, or whatever, right? And I love the way that's, like, a lot of these are phrased in such a, like, simple, kind of evocative, and also vague way. Like, the hospitality of somebody doesn't say whether it's good hospitality or bad hospitality, right?
Sure.
So you definitely can kind of, like, flavor it in your own.
But, you know, after discovering so many of these story games, the subtlety of writing a phrase to cue something seems to be the genius of writing these games in general.
Yeah.
Of being able to give you enough to work with that you can chew on something, but be it broad enough for you to be able to feel creative enough to go in different directions. And all these games have that kind of element in it, and this one does that in a very good way too. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's literally
Imagery
just a
plays well
line.
to it, too. Right?
Yep.
The images that go on the map help a lot too.
Yeah. And I think this is like, if for anybody who wants kind of a very simple lesson in what story prompts can kind of look like and how evocative they can be, like, this is a great lesson, right? Like, the art is, you know, kind of seamless there. Like, the story prompts just really work. Speaking of which, like, some of we've talked about locations and the little scenes that have a story prompt. There's ones that have traits where you can give that trait to somebody. There's also these other ones that come up called perils. And the perils, it'll have like a prompt, like Unique was just pointing at scouting ahead, and the prompt is the danger you fear. But then you set a little bit of the scene that way, and then you roll a 6-sided die and then depending on your result, you get another story prompt. And, it could be like ambushed, so something bad, versus sunbreak, because, this is the Storm Guard Mountains, right? It's all stormy, and now the sun's come out, right? So it can be like good to bad kind of things.
I actually managed to get people to avoid that entire area because I told them that it was rife with giants that would menace us immediately. Because I was playing a giant. And one of the cool things about the whole thing is that I established an entire giant culture throughout the entire thing and a history about what happened to giants. So
Nice.
There's definitely a lot to work with here to just like insert story elements and create sort of a vivid background to your universe as you go.
Yep. And there isn't really much preventing you from going in that direction, right? These story prompts don't tell you what the world is like. They're just giving you like an idea of what to explore.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you guys have like these kind of peril locations? Did they come up much? Did you guys play with them
we
much?
did do them.
People went for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever there's something different, a mechanic where we're rolling, which hardly
people want to
happens
roll
in
some
this game.
dice. Yeah,
you
people
want to
love
try
roll.
it out. I want to kind of lose a little bit of storytelling control in that.
Right.
Make myself go in a different direction, and I think it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
But at the same time, some of the I forget which one. There was one that we really hoped.
I
that-
feel like
we're
every character wanted this to be.
Yeah, we're
the
like,
role.
oh yeah, okay, I'm gonna try it. I'm gonna
And
see
I
if we
think
can get it.
2 characters went there to
Right?
specifically
Yeah,
try
yeah.
to
'cause
get that
I forget
role.
which one it was. We'll see
It's
as we
later
keep
down
rolling.
there.
Yeah.
Right.
But
that's cool.
yeah, people were just like, we want this to happen. Let's make it happen.
It
Come
fits
on, roll
the
the dice.
narrative in our minds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you'll notice, like, if you're looking on the screen, or looking at the map itself, we're looking at a spot where there's a fork in the road, right? So whoever kind of grabs the magus there kind of has the authority to go one way or the other, right? And there's a good number of little forks in the game. I mean, they're not constant. Like, you'll generally visit, like, 2 or 3 places in a row, maybe 3 of them, and then you're given a choice. And then you've got another, 3 in a row before another choice. So, yeah, there's some choices, but it's not like a huge thing. Once you're going to the Stormguard Mountains, you definitely have to go to Castle Stormguard. And then,
So did you guys?
Did
you
you
guys
guys-
go through the mountains?
No,
We did.
You guys did.
We did.
You
And
you
avoided
did
them
not.
with Some,
Okay.
Yeah.
I've almost
giants?
never been there.
Well, the whole thing is that I was like the last giant left in that western part of the world, and I was just guarding these woods. And the reason I was with the party is because I'll help you do this if you make the king curtail hunting in my woods.
Oh.
That was the bribe they put me to buy in to do this thing. So at that point, I was like, well, I'm extremely honorable, and I know that there's a lot of peril in those mountains because there are storm giants there. And those are even bigger than me. Those are big, big guys. So we should probably avoid that place. And everyone, okay, they just took me at face value. And, sure, we'll just go somewhere else.
Say it with confidence. I'll
Yeah.
believe you.
Did you guys go through there? I can't remember.
No,
you
we
went up
went-
through the
we
woods.
went up to Mistwood.
Because that
Yeah.
was one of the ones that we skipped.
Yeah.
Because we did Mistwood, and then
And
we were
then-
like, oh, we've kind of already had
Yeah.
our wood time adventure. Let's
Yeah.
keep going.
Generally, almost every time I've played, we've gone up through the woods. But this time we actually went through Stormguard, and we had somebody from there who was kind of like the prince who...
The air.
Yeah, kind of the heir who was a little bit of a bumbling kid. But turns out maybe not quite the heir, maybe kind of on the run, which is why.
Oh.
But, I thought like, oh, maybe we would avoid it for that reason, but we ended up going through there, and it was a little bit like kind of like a big important scene, and we had to deal with the Storm Queen and, and kind of run for our lives and all that kind of good stuff. But we got to go on the ice rail, and the ice rail is kind of like this weird ice train that they
Yeah.
have
Oh, that's cool.
on the map, which I've never gotten to explore
cool,
before.
Yeah.
And that's where
I don't think I even looked at this.
I don't either.
No,
I
that was a
think
big element
we
of
were
our
so
story.
distracted by the mouth of the deep and what was on the other side of the map that I don't
Yeah.
even think we looked there.
Well, we can talk about the Mouth of the Deep,
Yes,
too,
please.
which is great, because if you flip the scroll
Here,
around...
and we can actually do this. Like,
Well-
it comes out.
Oh, there you
here.
go.
So when you get to the fork in the road, you might end up going to this mouth of the deep.
And then you have this choice, right? There's this little like road that goes down to a torch, and if you go to the torch, then you go to the underworld, right? And you can see it starts here, and you end up going to the Hanging City, which is kind of like this underground city or
Yeah.
whatever. And then there's all these underground locations, and like you were saying, it's on the back side of the map, right? So if you were just looking at the scroll as it is, you wouldn't even realize that the underside of the scroll has this underworld. Right?
Basically an underground world. And we did not explore that.
Neither did we.
No.
Although there was some discussion about whether we wanted to or not.
Yes, absolutely.
The only reason we didn't is because we were running shorter on time, and if we weren't going to do that, we really wanted to explore it. So we were kind of hoping that maybe we'd get a second game or something like that going on, but that never happened. But yeah, I mean, it looks so interesting, and once again, even the art style just lends itself so well to you understanding. I mean, the big, giant underground dwarven double door just looks so cool, and I'm going, oh, I can tell so many stories. Gates of Umbra, which is the place where you're heading.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the interesting part is, if you choose to go through that torchway and underground, you then emerge on the other side of this giant ocean,
right?
And you don't experience the whole ocean mechanic, which was cool.
Yeah.
And I think that was a decision our party made.
We were like, we want to do
the island.
Yeah, we were like, I want to play at least one of these cards.
Felt like we had to choose one or the other with our time restraints. That was definitely.
Well, let me tell you, we actually got into an argument about whether we wanted to choose a random card or actually look through the cards and pick one that we wanted to use.
And what did you go with?
We picked a random one. Okay. I was on the other side of that fence. There was some stuff.
What's your argument?
Well, I saw some things that immediately sort of like lent themselves to our storyline and the direction that we were going, and I thought it would be better to make a choice and then tell the story we want to tell versus being thrown yet another random element and sort of
the rules I think were cool enough though that you pull two random ones and you pick the one you want, so there's a little bit of control in that.
Right.
I think it was more me going, ooh, I really like that card. I want to tell a story in this card, and more greediness than anything else. But
that's fair.
It isn't a criticism of the game. It was just like everybody was so passionate about the kind of stories they wanted to tell that we actually started arguing about where we wanted to go, and that's kind of neat.
That's the one we got.
We did get that one actually.
The Crystal Island. That sounds so cool.
Yeah,
the library.
If you do end up here not going underworld
too,
and you go through Estalia, then you have this. What's great is this next scene. I love this scene. Is like the Sea Wing, right? Mm-hmm. So one of the locations is just the boat, right? So you getting on the boat and meeting the crew basically, and whoever is maybe the captain, the hospitality of Grandmother Black. Maybe that's the pirate queen. Who knows, right? Like, it's up to you how that works. But you get on this boat, and then you've got these three little islands that get you to the other side of the ocean, right?
Which are essentially three locations, because you pull a different island for each one.
And, I mean, the stack is, I think it's about a dozen deep. So there's, like, a good variety of islands you can explore on the way. And actually, one of these is even greater. Like, this is not even an island. Right, like this one is the
Something
dread
happened.
calm.
Yeah.
So you're just quiet, like you're on the boat and you're just stuck.
You're
in
a
the
doldrum
ocean.
in the ocean, just stuck on the boat.
Right. So this is like it's a lot more introspective and just like playing with each other and with the crew, right? But yeah,
these are great.
Still, just all great, and this was a great way of just sort of shaking things up, because like you said, I think my problem with it initially when I started looking at the game and thinking about it is like, what's the real awesome replayability of this? I could see myself playing 12 times, maybe tops, and then I'm going to start going, I'm probably going to start rehashing same old ideas just because. And then I saw the cards and I saw the underside, and I'm like, oh, so you just got to get through the actual, what we know, into the unknown, and then there's a lot of variance that you can have on.
Yeah, we had the same conversation at the table about, like, this is super fun, but after 5-10 plays,
am I going to want to pull this map out that I'm so familiar
are
with?
you like, do you know so much about the map and the prompts that you're like, I know what's coming next, okay, let's go on there. I've seen 15 different people answer these questions, so I kind of know a broad spectrum of that.
And I think
which is the flashback ideas. I think.
I think there's going to be like ways you can kind of play with it, right? Like you guys are illustrating exactly my problem with the game is that I've played the first half of it so many times,
right?
And so like finding those little ways to kind of play with the idea. I will talk a little bit about people who've kind of iterated a little bit on this. We'll talk about it maybe later. Like Autumn of the Ancients is like a space version of this, but it's very much this game. It's not very different at all.
To be honest with you, man, I could see making a map out of cards like this in general and just creating sort of like a random thing for you.
So, speak of the devil, so what I did a while ago, being a games on demand guy and like not being able to easily travel with this big bulky map, is I took all the locations and I kind of, used some Photoshop magic and like hacked it all. So like this is basically a deck of cards, but each card is a location, right? And they're numbered, so they're in order, right? And when you get to those locations, like it'll tell you what the next possible locations are. So maybe it'll, then this one will only go to the next location. But here at Castle Stormguard, you can choose, am I going there or there, right? The ice rail or the deep. But what's great about having it as a deck like this is you could do exactly that, right? Just like randomly pick locations out and therefore go, okay, well, we know we have time to play 5 of them. And we know we want Umbra to be the last one. So I'm going to put that at the bottom, kind of shuffle some things up, and then we can just play them in some, random order. But
also, being sort of a hobbyist and a crafter, I can see myself making my own scrolls.
Oh, yeah.
Getting some nice raw silk and maybe some iron-on material and actually making like an Asian sort of looking one with like and I just see there's so much just the raw creativity of the scroll. I think is something that can be replicated if you're crafty and want to spend the time doing that and just using the same general rule set to make that happen.
Yep.
I think that says something about the game, though, when you think about like the different ways that you could play it in a different version. Like you want to, like you want this to work because it does. It's fun.
Yeah.
The more you love a system, the more you want to hack it.
Mm-hmm.
It is something where like I want to see more people making things that kind of have some of these elements. And again, like when we get later on, I'll talk a little bit about that. But should we dive across to the end here?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's see what the end looks like.
Like the end is, we're crossing this ocean and we get to Umbra, which is the name of the land, which I guess you're going to, right?
Right.
And this is where magic was born. And, you can come up here from the underworld. You can come across using the boat. And you end up having a lot of locations which have these funny little icons on it, which is one other new type of location called a change. And with change, what happens is you're going to set a scene there just like normal, but the idea is you're going to change something about your character. Mm-hmm. Like, literally, you have a name, you have a title, and a place you're from, right? So you're
maybe a couple traits.
And so you're going to change one of those things. So it is kind of almost mechanical, even though it's very story-driven, right? But maybe if you were the heir of Stormguard, maybe you're changing it so you're no longer the heir, right? Now I am the lost of Stormguard or whatever, right? So you get to kind of like figure out what that is, but that's the intent of those locations.
So my favorite thing about this final area is how it's an exact, some of it is almost an exact mirror of the beginning.
The exact
So
prompts.
like it's Raven Hall at the beginning and over here it's Crow Hall, but the ruins of, and then like it's the same story location.
The same prompts and the same location.
With a little bit of change.
I have played this game so many times, I have never noticed that.
What?
I've never
That was
noticed
immediately what we noticed, and we loved it so
I haven't
much.
even seen that.
I was so excited. I was
Last
like,
time
oh yeah.
we saw real magic and why you serve the mages. Like, it was
It's the
so
exact
cool
same
we got
prompts,
there.
but now it's like, now you have all this story to
the point where
answer
when
off of.
I was up to me, I had the Magus when we arrived there, and when I described the city, it was basically just a negative of it drilled into the ground, almost as if the city that was over on the other side was pulled out, and that was the indentation of it. So it was literally a cast negative of the city.
We ended up with this, with Crow Hall being like the Magus's original home, who then she had to leave, and she brought magic with her across the ocean, and she built Raven Hall as her new home. But like when we got back here, she used her magic to restore this, and like we even had like animal servants.
We did.
Like like sort of Victorian, like well, the fox in a little suit and that kind of stuff.
That's cool.
Which was fun. Yeah.
I think in ours we ended up having an ending where it was the end of the Age of Magic, and the new magus, the person who was kind of like taking over for them, was our little kid heir who had kind of gone off the deep end. and we lost them at the ice rail in a big explosion and all sorts of stuff. They showed up again at the end, and they declared that it would be now an age of electricity, right? And not necessarily like electricity meaning like what we have, but like electricity as a power source would replace magic. And part of our epilogues were kind of like that 100 years later, and everything's all weird electrical things versus
cool.
like whatever.
Yeah. That all of the trait changes and all the changes ended up being applied to the child that we were carrying, because that was sort of like the center of what was happening over there. And the choice was do you sacrifice the child and continue being able to draw magic, or do you destroy magic and let the child live? And that was the sort of like end element that we had at it.
Those are some good stakes.
Some drama.
Yeah.
And the entire story, my giant was like going, would it be so bad if magic was gone? I mean, giants live without magic. We've never had it. It's fine. We're okay. I'm good. I eat every day, so it's great. And just trying to wear them down. It's just like, this is just useless crutch that you guys have. You know, why do you need it? And there was an argument about the nature of magic and the necessity of magic throughout the entire story, which was kind of neat.
One thing I'll mention about the rules at this point in the end game is the recommendation. And again, you can ignore any of this as you will for any of this game, but the recommendation is you kind of roll up the scroll and place it to the side, so you're not looking at it anymore, and you're kind of discussing together like your thoughts and feelings on the game. So like there's this kind of intention of like we've kind of moved on from the game and put it, away, and now, so like instead of like going back and looking, and you kind of want to. I mean, like it's hard. There's a temptation there to go like, I just want to see where we just came from, and I want to look at all these places. And
yeah, we totally did.
And
we
gave
totally did.
And that's
not
fine,
listen to
right?
that. Like, unwrap everything. Let me see what we
We
missed.
did the exact opposite, to where we put the scroll aside and said, screw it. All right, we got 15 minutes.
Let's
What do we
talk
want to?
about.
And there was no turns. There was like people just throwing ideas out on the table, and
Nice.
then sort of like going, we picked that, and that, and then narrating the end, and we were done.
Well, we kind of
We
unrolled
wrapped it up.
but we that was like after we'd finished our story.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't part of when we were kind of doing our epilogue and finishing.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, okay, now we finished. Let's look at this because
Yeah.
it was cool.
But it is. Like I've met Ross and I've played with him a couple times, and like some of the
I
other
don't even
games.
think I noticed that was in there, to be honest.
Right.
with you.
So if you look like toward the end there's definitely this part where it's like, oh, now that you've finished your story, like roll it up.
Oh yeah, roll the
and-
scroll.
Right. Like it gives you like some specific rules on how, how they kind of envision this end game to look like, the debrief to look like after the game, etc. And again, you can take it with a grain of salt, right? Do whatever you want to do, but yeah, it's kind of neat. Like so, we had the same problem where we had a bigger table. Ours was, I think we had 5 in the beginning, and then Rob joined us at like about half an hour in. Kind of showed up late. It was like, oh, can I join you guys? And we were like, yeah, sure. It's easy. Just make a character jump in, right? He knows what he's doing. So we did that, but 6 players is a lot.
Yeah.
I think this game really sings with like 4. And even 3, you could have like a nice, intimate kind of story. You can definitely do it with more, but because our game was slower, we really, we were at that 40 minutes left, and we were not even halfway through this thing, right? So we decided at that point to kind of accelerate things by having each person take a turn, kind of jumping us from location to location.
Oh.
So we quickly did a round where we jumped through 6 locations just so we can get all the way to the end. We did 1 island instead of 3, for
Okay.
example, because otherwise we just couldn't make it all fit. And even when we got to Umbra, I think we did 1 island and then just went to Umbra. We didn't go to...
Yeah, it's the same thing. We did
Right.
1 island and one.
So there are ways you can kind of play with that if you needed to push the story faster. And we did get to a satisfying ending because we all got to do our little character epilogues. We got to see what happened to the mages. But, if you have a one-shot, just be prepared that might be some strategy like that. One of these things we've discussed is something you might need to pull off.
And there's so much, like you said, you could do an entire campaign in sessions of this
I
without a
think
problem.
that would do this game the most
Justice.
justice. I think, is to break it up into a campaign, because then you could really flesh out every location and really enjoy it without that feeling of like I want to see everything and I want to experience everything.
Yeah, well, most of these story games don't really lend themselves to a longer format. This one actually kind of does. You can really see yourself spending 2 or 3 days doing this over several sessions and really flesh out a story. But I think you're right. 3 to 4 players is sort of a sweet spot for this, because that lets everybody have enough spotlight.
Yeah. So I'm curious. Like, I have some other thoughts about things, but what did you guys think of the game? Like, would you play it again? What did you like and dislike about it? Yeah.
I would totally play again in a heartbeat. I had a really good time with it. I'm actually more motivated to play it again having heard your experiences with the game.
I think at the end of our game, which was actually a good game, I liked it, so it's not that the game wasn't fun, but I think at the end I was questioning the replay value of it, where I was just like, I want to play it with this map, with this really pretty map, but after I play it 3 or 4 times, did I just spend $100 to play a game 3 or 4 times? Right. But now hearing, and I think what helped was also jumping over to your table and seeing that, because I really love story games that way, with the character interaction. I think I could definitely get into playing this quite a few more times.
Yeah.
And it didn't even occur to me when we were sitting down to play. Like, that was just not the way this setup went in my head. It was...
And we also, I think, like, who you play with makes a difference. And we had some players who had some really strong ideas and I think really presented and kept bringing up their storyline very strongly in every location we went. So it definitely felt more disconnected in that way.
Oh, interesting.
Out of all of the story games that I've played with you and outside of this one, I think, is more keyed towards having a table that has some type of consensus as far as style.
Yes.
Better than any other one. Usually with other games, like let's take Skeletons for instance. Even if you're slightly skewed on the way you're looking at it, the environment of it is so concise that you're all going to start going in a fairly similar direction after a while. There was a lot of tugging.
Yeah.
There was a lot of tugging between where some of the players wanted to go and some of the players didn't want to go, and so on and so forth. So I think that this game could fall apart for a lot of people if they're at a table that everybody at the table sort of just doesn't really want to do what you want to do, which is another great reason to do that sort of like grid thing that you do at the beginning of everything, where you're going, you know, what style of game do you want to guy,
or
a fun
game,
or you know, what you want to do, and have people that actually have a general idea. This is the kind of game you want to playing at the same time, because I can see myself being very frustrated if I really wanted to tell a cool fantasy story and everybody wanted to go super gonzo and fun. I would be a little disappointed because, you know, you're going to get overpowered by the 3 other players, and that's just going to happen.
And you weren't even sure if that was going to work the way it did with StarCrossed, right?
No, and so so like that was so for those listening at home, like when we played StarCrossed Space Station Phobalex, that's like a bunch of 2-player games, and the tone is very important because you're playing these small romantic games, right, base games. So one of their strategies is lay everybody out on a grid on the room and get the people who want to play serious games kind of together and the people who want to play silly games together. People who want to play more intimate games, they will be matched up, versus people who want to play more like, you know, wholesome or silly games. Like, I don't want to do the serious romance stuff. So you're getting people who are kind of tone matched. This game doesn't have that per se, but I knew that I was getting a whole room full of people together who were going to split into 3, 4, 5 people tables and play this game. And what you're saying, you know, it's really insightful. I mean, but that's one of the things that I had a fear about coming into it. I knew that if I just randomly put people together, that tone mismatch could be really big, and this game suffers if that's the case. So I was hoping that would kind of work. I wasn't really sure if it hit the mark perfectly, but I was hoping it at least would get like the people who wanted the silly games very in different tables than the people who wanted the serious games.
They were definitely far apart from each other.
Yeah, but I didn't feel like at our table, I didn't feel like we were like light years apart on what kind of story we were telling.
I mean,
so I think it worked pretty well.
I fell into this is basically just a what if for me. It's more. I'm not saying that's exactly what happened.
No, I think that's a great observation, and it's very important for people to know.
It could happen,
and you would not enjoy that game.
And it would be contentious. And one of the things that I hate having in any type of these creative games is having a lot of contention, because it really detracts from your ability to yes and and to really come up with cool new things. Because if you start feeling intimidated by other people's ideas, or you start feeling like nobody really wants to cooperate with you, that's when you shut down, and that's when you're no longer interacting with the game, and the game falls apart.
Yep. I will say that, like, from my experiences of the game, it is a little bit more of like a somber-y, slower-paced game. Like, it kind of lends itself to that. That doesn't mean you can't have humor. Like, I've played this game where we were laughing hysterically because you can have fun scenes and you can go silly. But
a lot of the prompts aren't written silly.
That's right.
No.
So it keeps you
right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like and even just the opening premise is like the Magus is dying and magic is dying with her. Like that's not like all right, everybody, let's have an ice cream social.
Cheerio.
Yeah. Let me get my bag full of cartoon stuff, portable holes, and
but the fact that you can, but the thing is, the fact that you can pick and choose so many elements of where you go and what you choose to do, you can actually sidestep a lot of the more serious tone stuff if you really wanted to.
Yep.
I mean, because there's a lot of directions you can go with this game, but it's one of those things where you're on sort of like I said, it's somewhat on railsy sort of things where you're going from one step to another. But there, although it was very lighthearted and very well handled at our table, there were a lot of discussions like, well, I kind of want to go this direction. Oh, I kind of want to go this direction. And there was, I think, more time that I would have liked to have spent having those conversations versus just choosing something and moving on. And I think it slowed down our game a little bit.
Yeah. It is good to, a couple things. One, if you know the end game is coming, like planning for it, as it sounds like a lot of us did, right? We thought about like, oh wow, we're running out of time. How do we wrap this up in a satisfying way? Because you don't want to just end it and then just like, oh, we're out of time.
We didn't make it.
Yeah, that would not be fun. Like it's good to have that 15-minute. Have some kind of resolution with an epilogue or like how do you
that's the thing is like you need to finish right. I mean
unless you don't like if you're playing at home and you're gonna like we can pick it up next week you can do that but like at a con or something
crazy if we didn't finish that.
I just spent 3.5 hours.
I am staying.
It's like I'm stealing your scroll. Whack. Let's go to my room and finish this.
We're just gonna we'll see you guys later.
So one of the things that we like to focus in on in this show is what we call the takeaway, which is something that's an element in this story game that will inform things that will follow you into other more traditional role-playing games or other story games. Are there elements of this game that are new or somehow thought-provoking enough for you to go, oh, that's kind of a neat thing, I might want to use that elsewhere?
I don't have to have a fully fledged out character to tell a really good story. I think I started with a name and a title.
Yeah.
I still
making it up as you go is actually
had a full storyline going on.
The thing is, there's two ways of looking into that too, because when you're loosey goosey like that, and you sort of like get some very basic things about your character, and you sort of develop them as you go, that means that the character becomes informed by the narrative. When you make a character that has a fully fleshed out background, and you're playing that character is actually more informing the narrative than the narrative informing the character. So it's two different ways of looking at it. I find that over preparing sometimes can shoot you in the butt, and sometimes over preparing is a great thing. Like I wanted to have a lot of preparation in the Call of Cthulhu game because I wanted to have a lot of things to draw from because the world was already kind of established. We know it's 1920s America, right, or Europe. But when you're dealing with a fantasy setting, I find it far more entertaining to go with very minimal things and sort of create the fantastic universe as you're going. Yeah. So, historical games or reality-based games, I like one version, and more creative type fantasy games, I kind of like another one.
I know that in the beginning of this book, there's one whole page in the instructions which just give you a little bit of advice on how to play. Mm-hmm. And you'll see this echoed with a lot of more modern games as well. I mean, this one's been around for at least 4 years or 5 years now. But, the 4 main points is it's like a conversation, right? And we've heard that over and over again. But again, if some of the players in your table have a very strong idea of what they're doing and they're constantly pushing that narrative, that's not really a conversation, right? That's talking at people, right? So it's good to try to, kind of refocus or have that attitude coming into it. And so, like, if you don't have that attitude, the game will probably suffer a little bit for that, right, in one way or the other. Think small is another piece of advice, right? Like, the stakes are small in some cases, right? You don't have to, like, think of, like, the big sweeping narrative and, wait, why is actually all this stuff happening? Like, we can figure that out as we go.
Now everything has to be the One Ring, right?
Yeah, like, right now, you're in this town, you're
Sometimes
trying to get a
you
side
just
of ham.
find somebody's lost ring,
Yeah.
and it's just a ring.
It's just a ring. Damn, just a ring.
It's not even a real precious metal.
It's like cobalt.
Whittled.
Yeah, it's just some kid with some soap was carving.
One of the things that I love about this game are the prompts.
Yeah.
And looking over all of the prompts, I think that's a lot of these games could be set up. I can set up an entire game just queued on some of these prompts because they're so well written. And when I'm writing adventures or one shots or campaigns, a lot of times what I'll do for like a scene or a story plot point is I'll just write it as a phrase of something. Like it says, and now this bundle is found. Where did it come from? Where does it need to go? And that's the entire scene, and then I just sort of like figure things out from there.
Yeah.
And games like this, especially this one, really give you a really good example of how masterfully you can write these prompts to be able to give players a broad enough playground to do what they want in.
And my favorite is when they're worded in that way, which can be interpreted in like so many different ways. So they're not totally leading you in a certain direction, right? They're still giving you that kind of open, like even my character, one of the games, I was the midwife of Barleytown, but the way I interpreted that was that I was the middle wife. I was the Barleytown guy had 3 wives. I was the middle one. I'd run away.
There you
and
go.
so I was the midwife, right? And so like you can kind of play with all these words and come up with your own little
interpretations. Exactly.
I think because I have a lot of friends that don't play story games, I start seeing them through that lens about how they can be intimidating, a lot of games for people. And what I liked about these prompts is that you can go, for someone who enjoys story games, in depth, and you can take that prompt and go run with it. And others, it could be like, I could just tell a story literally about my hometown, and it's really simple. So I think it's not intimidating, and that's a really big plus for me.
Yep.
It's appealing visually. It's attractive. It's unintimidating. The rules are simple and but they still give you a fixed goal. One of the things that a lot of story games, you never really have like a fixed goal, or you're not driving towards something. This game gives you something to drive towards.
There's a definite starting point
and a
definite end, and a
a
couple routes
which is
to get
kind
there.
of unique about this game, I think.
Yeah. I have played this game with kids before.
Okay.
And it's worked really well. So at Games on Demand for Kids, about a year ago, or just over a year ago, we had a session where I ended up having 6 kids, all girls, all between the ages of, I want to say, like 9 to 11.
Great.
And it was fantastic. Like, I didn't follow 100% the rules. Like, I would have them each take turns, and they did a couple of these scene prompts and stuff. But when it came to the magus, instead of having them, take control of this other character, I was kind of afraid of what would happen there. I kind of decided to play the magus, and I had a very light character. It was just kind of more like, I'm going to give you a direction, go. I didn't even necessarily go with them. I might have told them to go to this next town, and then they just went to the town, and maybe I'll pop up later, right? So almost like that kind of Gandalf, which shows up every once in a while and says a thing and then pops away, right?
Epic world-changing event set in motion.
Goodbye.
But
Have fun.
But I asked my daughter right just before I came here, I'm like, do you remember that game? Like, what did you like about it? And her main thing was she felt like it was so freeform. Like, she felt like she could come up with anything she wants. It's not like, if you're playing like a game with a GM and they're telling you the story and you're playing in that story. And that can be great. Some kids love that because they want that direction.
Kid loves that.
They're, right? Like, and I remember being a kid, like, I liked the math. I liked the inventory. I liked having a goal and directions and, like, figuring out how do I solve this puzzle, right?
Yeah.
But there's some kids who don't go into story games with that attitude. And so, like, one of the girls that played in that game, she was, like, you could tell she was one of the younger ones, but she's also like kind of mature story-wise. She reads a lot. She writes her own stories. You know, she mentioned that, you know, when we were talking. And she was like doing all sorts of stuff in the game that where you can see like, oh, like she's at that storyteller level, right? And you could see her being a great GM at some point as well. But she didn't want to be that player in somebody else's game. Yeah. That's not what this game is. And I think if you have those kind of players or kids who want to be able to really write their own thing, this is like something to kind of play with and see. Yeah. I remember there was one of my favorite scenes of that kid game was there was a scene that came up and she was trying to make this bad thing happen, like the forest, you know, was catching on fire, something was wrong with her magic, and the other kids at the table who were traveling with her were all trying to solve it. And she kept like one-upping them with more bad stuff. Like, no, but this happens. No, but this happens. And I was I was like, I could see what was going on there, right? Yeah. I was like, okay, hold on a second. Let's stop for a second, game-wise. Like, what is it you're trying? Like, this is your scene, right? You're kind of in control here. What is it that you really want to see happen? And she kind of stopped, and she's like, I want to see my character fail and not get this thing done. And all the kids didn't realize, like, they were just trying to fix a problem.
Right.
So they were like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like, they were totally down for that. So I let her set that scene, and then I was like, okay, kids, each of you tell me what you do to try to fix it and how it fails. And they went around and they tried to fix the problem, but then they also were like, and this is what happens. And suddenly the whole forest was on fire. They were like in Mistwood or something. And it was totally tragic, right? Yeah. It was. It's my home. But these are a bunch of young girls. So it was, like, that story was dark as fuck. Like, by the end of the story, like characters were dying. Some of them lost their souls forever. Like, like they were controlling their own epilogues, but they were doing like dark stuff. And it was like, all right, that's the story they wanted to tell, right? But having, you know, just having that cognizance, like, you're in control of the story, and if we're having a conflict, because that'll happen, where sometimes someone will come in with a very strong idea, you know, take a second, sit back, let's have an adult conversation about this, and then figure out how we want to...
Well, it's always great when somebody asks, just takes away all of the shit that's around and goes, this is the actual question that we need to ask.
Right.
What kind of story do you want to tell? Yeah. And or what, you know, what are you trying to establish that is true?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need somebody to sort of, wait, we're dancing around what the actual fact is. Let's focus on this.
A couple of things attached to this game. So importantly, if you're listening to this, like, this is the game as it came out, the one we played. However, earlier this year, there was that Kickstarter Zine Quest thing, and Ross actually put out something called like the Songs of the Axe and Fiddle, which is, I think, one of the locations in Barleytown or something.
Oh, the pub or
yeah. So
it's. Did we have a karaoke night there?
Yes, we did.
Awesome. So there's a little zine that he put out about, like, that's kind of, I guess it's a little almost like mini expansion for the game. I haven't looked at it yet. I haven't quite received it in the mail yet. But that's something to look into if you've already got this game and you're interested. That's a thing that's out there. Another one is, again, Jen Martin and Adam Robichaud wrote a hack called Autumn of the Ancients. I don't know that it's ever going to be like officially produced, but for a while it was out there like a space version, and they were talking to Ross about doing something with it. It may or may not ever happen, but it's very easy to take something like this game, and you can almost play it as is in space if you just changed some of the words around. Yeah. Made each of these locations a planet or some other interstellar location, right? Mm-hmm. You could do that. And there's two other games I'd like to just quickly, you know, shout out to. One is Philip Wessel, who wrote a game called Pack of Strays, Wolf Run. And he'd originally written a game called Pack of Strays, and then the Wolf Run was a special version of that, and it's like a werewolf-themed game. Like, we're a pack of werewolves, and we're dealing with all sorts of, like, alpha wolf-type drama. And that game came out in the Gauntlet Codex, specifically Codex Asphalt, which came out in 2018. And it's a card-based game, which it is inspired in some ways by some of these prompts and things. I've got to play it at Big Bad Con a year ago, and it was fantastic. A lot of the mechanics are very different. The prompts are very different. Him and Ross talked about it because there was, I think, originally when he posted the game on the calendar, he said it was inspired by this game, and it's like, wait, you know, is it copying the game? Like, to what extent? How close is it? And it's you know, Ross has looked at it, and it's its own game. But if you're really into this game and you're looking for something like it, that does something similar with prompts, but mechanically it's different, and it starts adding like a chase mechanic and some other stuff, it's something to look at.
That's cool.
And then I'll toot my own horn. So there's 2 guys in Malaysia who are writing a game or a world called 1,000 Islands, and it's a Southeast Asia-inspired fantasy setting. Definitely look it up. Mung Kao is one of the authors, and ZXU is one of the authors. They do the art, they do all the writing for this, etc. And the first one of their books was called Merkurgur, the Death-Rolled Kingdom, and it's about a kingdom of magic alligator people, and the humans who serve them or live with them. And what struck me about it when I was first looking at it was the writing was so very poetic, and the art reminded me of this art. It's very like line drawn, very like consistently looking, kind of evocative. It had a very cultural feel of a certain fantastic place you've never seen before. And when they put it out, they've played D&D and stuff like that and OSR games. So they're putting out, there's a setting with there's no mechanics in it. It doesn't tell you how to run it or what system to run it in. But I was looking at it, and I tried to run it in like a normal kind of fantasy system, and it just didn't work for me. And I just kept feeling like this was the system for it, was what this is doing, because this is just a journey. And that game is all about just exploring this place you don't know. And so I took the art, and I took the verbiage that they used and kind of converted it into story prompts, and basically made something which plays like Fall of Magic-ish, although I have like a GM running it. But in theory, you could do something like this. And I think it worked pretty well. I know some people here play that. But awesome. It's, I just think this thing here that Ross has done, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful work, right? Can just be used in a couple different ways. And I should mention, illustrated by Doug Keith and Taylor Dow. All the illustrations were done by them. Yeah. Indeed. But anyways.
So where can we get this fantastic game?
Heart of the Deernicorn. They have a website, which is heartofthedeernicorn.com. And if you go there, they have a little product section. You can see both you can get a physical copy of this. Again, $105 for the beautiful box and scroll.
It's pretty deluxe, man. It's pretty deluxe.
It's up there. But you're also supporting like a Made in America product, an American labor. And then there's also the digital edition.
Just based on what you're getting,
I'd hang that on my wall.
You get a lot for the money.
The coins are great.
And production value is fantastic. It all beautiful and very much worth the money. Especially now that we've decided that it has a lot of replayability.
Now that we've discussed it.
I'd like to go back and try a different way to tell the story.
Indeed.
And if you ever do come to Strategicon, I will always have it laying out there in front of Games on Demand.
Yeah.
And even if you just want to come by and play it, come by. You can borrow this game. As you've heard, it is a self-taught game.
Games on Demand, when you go down there, to me, it's like strolling through Paris and finding the woman of your dreams. It's like, oh my God, what is this? And then you play this game, and it's like the most fantastic thing.
And you never knew you even liked women.
Exactly. I was totally into mannequins, and it changed my
looking
mind.
for something else, and look what I found.
Yeah. Well, I think we're running short on time, so we're going to sign off here. Once again, I'll remind everybody, when you make stories together, you make memories together, and that is awesome. So please go ahead and check out these interesting little story games and small press RPGs so you can make up some stories and just have fun. And we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for joining us. This was Small Game Hunter Episode 7. I'm Jim.
Tomer.
Unique.
Kadave!
And thanks for joining Unique. First time on stream.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I hope you had a good time.
Yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
Bye.
All right, everybody. We'll see you later.
If I told you the things I'd seen on my waves, If I told you the things I've done in my day,